Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming to today's special Atticus webinar on 10 strategies to prepare your law firm for the coronavirus. Today's presentation is led by Atticus founder and practice advisor Mark Powers and Atticus practice advisor Sean McNallis. Mark, thank you so much for sharing this information today, and thank you to everyone who has made the time to come to today's presentation.
So thanks, Mike. Are we recording yet?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Sean.
Hello there.
So welcome, everyone. Let me just go through a couple of logistic items on the call. So if you have questions, we have time during the session, at the end of the session, and Sean and I are going to stay on this call past the hour. If you have questions or things you need to discuss about the preparing for the coronavirus as it hits your firm. So you can use the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and Mike will relay those questions if you want to say anonymous. Or you can click the hand icon and it will indicate to Mike that you want to be unmuted, and he will take care of that. So on the call, you've got me, obviously, and hopefully most of you can see me streaming. Hello. And then you also have Sean McNallis, who's not streaming. And if you look that good, you should be streaming if you ask me. And Sean is one of the founders of Atticus. She trains all the practice advisors. She's authored a number of books for us, and she's instrumental when we go into these sort of emergencies and crisis. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to be here. I just wish it was under different circumstances.
I agree. So to participate, make sure you have pens, pencil, paper, take lots of notes. As we said, it's going to be interactive and we'll be engaging with you. So Sean and I have three goals, and that is to create a readiness plan for you to support you, your staff, and your clients. To protect your team, to protect the firm as best we can from disruptions and business interruptions, and to position your firm as a market leader in providing powerful resources and solutions to your clients. And so, Sean and I want to just check in where you are right now. I know that the coronavirus has shaken most of our worlds and the response to his. So I'm just kind of curious, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I'm not worried at all, or 10 being my hair is on fire, we're absolutely worried. On a piece of paper, write down where you are personally, where you are when you think about your family, and where you are when you think about your firm. So what is your anxiety level or your level of concern around the coronavirus? And so I'm not going to poll most of you, but if you've written this down, our experience is that most of you are a 2 or a 3 when it comes to yourself. And you are probably a 3 or a 4 when it comes to your family. But when it comes to the firm, most of you are probably a 7, an 8, or a 9. And rightfully so. I think that it's important to have a healthy level of concern and anxiety about this right now, especially when it comes to the firm. And while there may be a lower probability of something happening to you or your family, there's certainly critical threats to your firm, and we want to address on that on this webinar. So one of the things you'll see on the screen in a minute is Sean prepared this risk assessment, and it's downloadable, so you can download this. But it's just a sense of where your practice is, and you can start to think about the high risk versus low risk. Do you want to talk about this, Sean?
Sure. So our intention with this was to assemble all the risk factors, things that you can control and things that you can't control. And you'll see those things listed in the left-hand column. So practice type. We think that litigation firms, especially those more dependent on advertising, high volume intake, We think they're going to be a little bit more vulnerable than, say, the transactional firms who are more document driven and have work that's a little more easily done by home-based staff. They can also do intake by phone. It may be a little more difficult for litigation firms to do that, though I'm sure that they will be experimenting. The level of remote access that you're used to, some firms already have team members who telecommute, and some have no experience with doing that at all. Type of clients, if you're working with the elderly, those with underlying conditions, you're going to be more at risk. If you have team or attorneys exposed or in high-risk populations, another risk factor. Some of your referral sources, I know for many of the estate planners that are on this call, you work with ALFs, hospitals, nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, veterans facilities. This is a risky source. It's going to be hard to be in and around those folks right now. Location, if you end up inside of a lockdown area, that's going to be a difficult thing to cope with. Schools are a trigger point. Once schools shut down, as they have for many of you already, it does force parents to work from home in many cases if there's not other childcare to be had. Emergency funds. This particular factor is huge. We preach always that you should have at least 3 months overhead, stashed away in an emergency fund. Some of you have been very good about doing that. Some of you already have loans. Some of you, are set up in this area. Some of you have open lines of credit that you can max out. So some of you are set up in this area, some of you are not. Those of you that are not, that's a real risk factor for you. Public relations, all of marketing is going to go virtual. So be very careful about how you use your social media. It's going to be one of your main modes of communication with your clients, in addition to email and text. Most of this, marketing will go online. Some firms have business interruption insurance, though you'll have to get an interpretation from your insurance company as to whether or not it's going to apply in a non-natural disaster scenario. So in any case, how you use this is you put a check mark next to the scenarios that you're closest to on the high risk side and on the low risk side. And where you have check marks next to the high risk scenarios, that's where you need to go to work. Those are the things you need to focus on. This is basically telling you your strengths and your weaknesses. As Mark said, this is available for download. You can download this immediately, start working on it within your firm.
So thanks, Sean. And for all of us, it's just a sense that making sure you know that, especially the shareholders, team leaders, managers in the firm, your leadership's going to matter during this crisis. So they're going to look, their team's going to look to you, your clients are going to look to you. They're going to want to see your guidance more than ever. Our job is to calm them, help them be responsive, and lead them to the other side of this crisis. And there obviously is another side of this crisis. And making sure you're taking care of yourself, because some of you are going to get a little stressed during this. You might stop exercising. You might discontinue your exercising. So make sure you're staying focused. A lot of people are going to be making errors under stress. So be patient, be kind. Anything you want to say about this, Sean?
I'm already hearing from clients that team members are acting in a very distracted manner and are making a lot of mistakes. So just be aware that this crisis is taking up a lot of bandwidth in people's brains, and they will be more prone to mistakes. So keep an eye on that.
And so before we go through the strategies, as long as we're talking about leadership, and Sean, I want to be careful with this, but for most of our clients, we're finding out as they build their preparedness plans, as they start calming everyone, they're starting to notice that there are some opportunities out of these challenges. And we don't mean any of this in an opportunistic way, but hidden in all of these challenges will be opportunities, will be breakthroughs, and we want to keep an eye out for them. And we'll point out some of them on this call. So there really are a number of opportunities that will propel you, your team, and the firm to a whole other level. So this isn't all doom and gloom as we look at it, but for all of us, we really want to know what can we do right now to prepare our team, our clients, our community, and depending on the duration and the severity of the crisis, figuring out what our financial austerity plans are going to be, or what it's going to take to work in a virtual mode, or how do we protect our talent. So we're going to go into those strategies. And both Sean and I want to say, you want to start first off by separating some of the emotions that go along with this from the reality. So focusing on the facts, focusing on what's real, and understanding what you can and can't control. So you're not going to be able to control the courts if your building gets shut down because you're inside of a larger building, or if the schools close down, you have no control over that. You have no control if the state locks down your community, and you have no control really over people around you becoming ill. But what you can control is your attitude, your anxiety, and your expectations. You can control whether your team can work virtually and how well they do that. And you can control your expenditures, which we're going to talk a little bit about. Sean, you want to say anything before we step into strategy one?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, strategy one. Strategy one is the basics in some ways, right? We all have to be doing this right off the bat, infection control. So we want the basic CDC guidelines working in the firm, everyone clearly following them. And I think for most of you, you're doing that. And I think you want a policy, you want straight conversation with the team to mandate that if they have any respiratory issues, exposure to someone, or just returned from a trip to an infected zone, that they need to self-quarantine and work remotely.
And Mark, if I could jump in here.
Yeah.
So we really want to have extreme compliance on this particular note. What we don't want to have happen is a team member who is starting to feel symptoms but pushes him or herself to go to work anyway because they know they only have a couple of days paid sick leave, and they know they've got car payments and mortgages. What you want to do is tell your people in advance, you're going to lengthen your sick pay policy. Also, the government is trying to come up with plans to support you in this particular area. Also insist that they get tested. And why this is so important is because this is a trigger point. If you actually have a team member or a vendor or a client who shows up in your office, it's going to force the firm to shut down. So you want to delay that trigger point as much as possible because it's more expensive for you to shut down the firm on some levels than it is to pay extra sick leave to your team. So just consider that.
So, Mike, if you have any available to you right now, if we have some shared policies, if someone has allowed us to share the policies they're doing with their team. I know that for all of you, most of you have shared, especially within the Atticus client community, have shared their employee policies and what they're doing there. And we're putting those, as soon as we see them and get permission, we're putting them on our Atticus Advantage Facebook page and our LinkedIn page. And after this is done, Mike can send out these slides, but he can also make sure he gives you the links to those pages. Strategy two. Strategy two is, again, some of you may be doing this already, but you have to have a preparedness team. And depending on the size of the firm, this could be you and your paralegal, or it could be a group of your managers. but we have to have a team that's in charge, responding, and making sure that everybody is following a plan, moving along along the pathway to get to the other side of this. So who's ever on that team is going to individually, for your firm, assess the impact of the crisis on your client, staff, cash flow, operations for each of your territories. So if you're in Idaho, there's no big risk right now, but if you're in New York, California, Florida, Texas, there's some big risks. So you want to assess where you are. Depending on if you're a PI firm versus an estate planning firm, there are different risks you're going to have. If you're inside of a firm, if you're inside of a larger building, a bank building, for example, that closes down. So you want to assess the real impact, how and when the firm can go remotely. We're going to be talking about a lot of those things, but there's a team in charge of that. Making sure there's protocols for the staff and the clients to communicate. There's a chain of command, and all the protocols are set. So that's pretty simple. Most of this stuff in the first two strategies, hopefully you're already doing. Strategy 3, and this is very important. We need to start, if we're going to take charge and provide calmness, we're going to have to educate, inform, and reassure our staff, our clients, and our referral sources. And some of you, it may not be referral sources, but it's influencers, people that influence business coming in. So you're going to be using your email, social media, you're going to use your blogs, your webinars, and sometimes the phone to communicate with these respective communities. But they need to know we're on top of this, we've got it, and you want to communicate confidence, but at the same time, empathy for where they are, their fears, their concerns, their frustrations. And where possible, and I think every one of you can do this, start looking and telling them the 3 things that you can do right now to help them. So, for example, I got an email from my local pharmacy, and they said the 3 things we're doing right now is we can deliver your prescriptions for free. We can do video chats for you if you don't want to come into the pharmacy. And they said one more thing. So these were things that were focused around the end user, not necessarily focused around what we're doing for us. So where is it that you can provide them value? And there's some examples here. So for the staff, we know, we'll talk about the staff in a moment and protecting your talent, but they need to know your policies on sick leave, if you're extending paid time off, whether they can work from home, whether they're going to do it. You can let them know if you can work with them on childcare. If a school closes, how can you support them with that? And straight talk around issues that impact them directly. The best thing we can do is speak very clear and straight to them. So if there's issues, they can prepare to deal with them and they're not shocked or surprised. We don't want to Pollyanna anything for them. With clients and prospects, you might have flexible hours. You might have remote sign up. You may have e-signings. What is it you can do for each of your practice areas? It'll be a little bit different. And by the way, I'll let you know later on when, but we're going to do specific response webinars for various practice areas as well. And I'll give you the times for those. But you're going to look to see what is it you can do for them from their perspective that would help them now. Referral sources, a lot of your referral sources and influencers are just like you. They're businesses, they're professionals, and they're struggling with the same things you are. So can you do webinars for helping them deal with the crisis? Could you do a care package for their firms? If things slow down, could you do something for them and their team? You could offer space, if you have it, in your building should they get shut down. So there's things you can do. I'm not saying those are exactly them, but there's things you can do that, and you want to find 3 things and let them know what you're doing for them. Sean, anything you want to say about that?
No, I think if we go to the next slide, I'd like to comment on that.
Okay.
So some of you are going to experience what some of us went through after 9/11. Clients will hunker down, people will withdraw, people may not be out there in force looking to sign up with a law firm. So you really want to maintain as close connections as possible with your existing clients. Do the things that Mark just referred to, become a helpful resource for them, and really communicate in the way they like to be communicated with. So if you're working with with an elderly population and you're broadcasting everything through Twitter, that's probably not the best match. If they're on Facebook, use Facebook. Go where they are. You can also create email newsletters during this time, letters through email. You can do hard copy print materials during this time. Just know what the preferred form of communication is that your clients can receive.
Okay, good. So strategy 4, it ties into your team, is you need to start protecting your talent. So Sean, do you want to speak to this?
Well, we know that many team members don't have much of a financial cushion, right? So they may be a paycheck or two away from a real problem. So many of the people we've already spoken to, owners of law firms, are considering offering no interest loans to team members to keep them going if they have to, God forbid, lay them off. So we're not encouraging that at this point as far as the layoff goes, but their idea is that they want to retain these people, but they may have to do something dramatic if the shutdown continues for a couple of months. So there may be a point at which they decide they have to let their team go. They can either furlough them, which means in many states they're still able to collect benefits, but they can also get unemployment, or they can lay them off. When you lay somebody off, you're not expressing an interest in bringing them back. If you furlough them, you are saying that their job is being held for them. So two different things to consider there. So obviously the government is coming up with some kind of an economic relief package, a lot of things in the works. We're not quite sure what's going to happen here, but we do believe that there is going to be federal funding forthcoming for small businesses to help them get through this crisis. So our third point here is if you are getting close to a layoff or a furlough with your team, let them know in advance so that they can prepare, so that you're being straight with them so that they are not taken by surprise. Mark?
You are going to give them time to prepare too, because in a minute we're going to go through some financial perspectives on this and how to start planning your money. Your cash flow, but you're going to have a sense in advance, and if you do, be straight with them. The other thing, there's the flip side of this coin, and it's depending on what your financial position is. But again, we're not trying to be opportunistic here, but it's just a reality. There are some firms, either a solo practitioner that's going to struggle and not be able to have enough resources to make it through, but they're a great litigator, or they're a great estate planning attorney or family law attorney, and it's a time to grab talent if you can and you can afford to do it. And there just may be other firms that have to let go of good talent because they just don't have any way of keeping them on the payroll. So again, we're not trying to be opportunistic, but the reality is there is going to be talent out there, and we have to keep our eyes out because there's going to be another side of this crisis, and we'll talk about that when it comes to marketing. So strategy 5. This is important, and hopefully you've already started to do this. Start practicing working remotely with your firm. If you're not already doing it, start practicing it. Set everyone's laptop with the appropriate level of access. Start training them to work from home. Have each department work from home for a couple of days. So if you have different departments, practice that. We have firms that may be on this line right now that have, if not close to, maybe over 200 employees. They've gone virtual, the entire organization, to just prepare. Have team members take their laptop home every night because, as you've seen, this is very fluid. Things change day by day, and if something changed in your community and there's a quarantine, it's quarantined at the end of the day. You need to be able to work remotely right away. And experiment with forwarding your phones to remote receptionists because right now you may not have a shutdown. Some of you may even be experiencing that, but you've got to prepare for this and practice this. There's a lot of things to keep in mind as you do that. There's a couple of trigger points for making this decision. Hopefully they're obvious. But if someone becomes exposed and becomes ill, your firm is going to be quarantined or your building is. Local schools close down, that's getting closer to home. You're having trouble with a staff member that can't come in, or your community goes onto lockdown. Sean, anything you want to say about this?
Perhaps we're following the Italian model here. We don't know for sure. And it could be that, there are escalating levels of lockdown in our future. So I think almost everybody has to prepare to go virtual as much as you possibly can. I think this is no longer an if question, it's a when question. I think almost everybody will be forced to go virtual.
So you're going to have to prepare and practice. You can make note of this, and again, I'll list all of this at the end. But we are doing a webinar on Thursday, this coming Thursday, the 19th at 11 o'clock, about how to optimize the virtual environment and how to utilize the technology properly. And we're going to make a few points about that, but Victor Medina is going to lead a webinar on that. He's extraordinary at thinking those things through. We'll have the time and date at the end of this, and Mike will make sure we have all of the upcoming webinar information. So it's going to be 3 phases of your remote access. You may work together still, but do rotation and social distancing.
So Mark, some people are already doing this. Some people are leaving a couple of people in the firm and having the other ones work at home, and then they're rotating shifts and staying far apart. For some people, that's how you're going to lengthen the amount of time you stay in the office. Like I said, and some firms will opt to leave the attorney in the actual facility with maybe one other person, a secretary, a paralegal, and the rest will work at home. That's kind of a second stage. The third stage is the entire firm goes remote. So wherever you are in this process, I think everyone will end up eventually going remote completely.
And, Victor, I think will speak to most of this on Thursday, but just as a reminder, some people don't keep this in mind, that your liability insurance won't cover problems that occur when a team member is using their personal laptop. So under emergency conditions, you may have them use their laptop, but you have time, and if you have time to work on this, make sure you're investing in a firm-owned laptop that they're using.
You also have to have your IT person put all the appropriate software encryption capabilities, fireword, password protections, etc., and then on that laptop for it to qualify, and you have to figure out different levels of access for different people. Victor would also want us to tell you that be careful of using your Wi-Fi in areas where there's a lot of opportunity for others to sign on to it and access your data. Make sure Wi-Fi is password protected and make the passwords difficult.
Yeah, so you have a lot of sensitive information, and we're going to have to be a little extra alert because in times of crisis like this, and there's so much virtual online work happening at new levels, there are going to be scammers out there, and they're going to be looking for any opportunity to take advantage of your data. So this is something that we think is important to pay attention to. John, do you want to talk about the files?
Yeah, and then many of you are going to be still working with hard copy files. Of course, try to scan as much as you can ahead of time, but if you're actually taking files home, take precautions. Don't let family members, roommates, etc., see anything sensitive. Those, this is all protected information. Don't print out documents and leave them on the printer. Don't leave documents open on the computer screen on a family computer where anybody can access them.
On the other side of this crisis, I think this is going to be a breakthrough for your firm in how to manage and grow using remote talent better and better for you and the firm. I know we're in the middle of the crisis, but I think there's going to be some other sides of this. So let's talk about your cases. Strategy 6, start to triage your cases, your work in progress right now. So there are some cases that need immediate attention due to statute of limitations, or there's some other deadlines. We know that hearings, trials, the courts are going to be closed. So a lot of rescheduling is going on, but we've got to prioritize these issues. And Sean and I are going to speak to the financial aspect in a little bit. We think that cash is going to be very, very important over the next 3 to 6 months. So cases that drive cash right away, make sure we pay attention to them and we prioritize them. And then the next level would be cases that need attention and we have to stay with and deadlines over the next 6 weeks. And then finally, there are cases that can be put on the back burner for right now. It doesn't mean that they don't have to be paid attention to, but this is probably the prioritization or triaging we need to do. Sean, you want to say anything about this?
No, I think that people will have less anxiety, both team members, attorneys, and clients, when you do this kind of triaging. And then you can, notify your clients that their cases are being handled with a minimum of interruption for them. You can reassure them that everything is moving along with a minimum of interruption and that, everything is continuing as much as possible the same way that it was before.
So, strategy 7, and for us, this is, we could easily put this one as the first strategy, but there's a lot of things, moving pieces here. But we think cash flow and financial planning right now is critical. We think that, listen, none of us know how long this slowdown is going to happen. We don't know your individual firm, depending on your practice area. If it's going to impact, it might impact cash right away, or it might impact it later on. Either way, we've got to be very prudent in this area. So 2 things. We're going to walk you through the things that we need to be thinking about right now. But we are doing, next week, we are doing a webinar on a lot more specifics and how to use cash flow forecasting tools more effectively in your firm. So I'll get you the date at the end of this webinar, but that's happening next week. And that's open to all of you as well. So the first thing is we want to assess essential and non-essential expenses. When you start thinking about essential expenses, that's your talent that goes to anything that's driving files right now, making sure that you're spending money, moving us to the remote abilities, those sort of things. Non-essentials might be some CLE things that you might be having to do. There might be some travel that doesn't need to happen. And we're not asking you to wait on those. We'd say start reducing non-essential expenses today, because even if you're in a good cash position today, we don't know how long it's going to last. Second, Sean, did you want to say something before I go to the next item?
No, I do want to remind everyone that we're offering 2 downloads in addition to the risk assessment form. We have 2 dashboards, one for litigation firms and one for transactional firms. You can use those forms, They're fairly self-explanatory. You can download them and use them on a monthly basis, or when things get really tight, on a weekly basis, to monitor what you're spending, what your cash flow is. It gives you a snapshot, and at this point, you need constant checking in on your finances, because this is going to make the difference between how you survive and even thrive at the end of this crisis.
Thank you. And so most of you on this call have probably lived through a financial crisis, an economic slowdown, whether it was the tech bubble, whether it was 9/11, whether it was the real estate bubble. You probably lived through it, and it impacted your firms in different way. But one of the things we did know, this one may or may not do it, but we think that it's always possible that banks and your financial institutions will tighten up money. So if you have a credit line, we're recommending that you draw down the cash now and move it into a separate account, into a separate bank. Because if the bank does tighten it up and it's in the same account, in the same bank, they may withdraw that. They may pull it right back. We don't, not all of you, depending on when Sean showed you that risk assessment form, depending on where you are financially, you should prepare an austerity plan in the event of a long-term slowdown. So this is even more drastic cuts. We'll talk about these in more detail on the webinar for financial controls, but you should have a basic plan about where you might have to make deeper cuts. Most of you don't have to implement that now, but if it goes on too long, cash gets too tight or too nervous, we're going to have to implement that. And you're going to want to start watching cash flow bi-weekly. And if you have the ability to project your cash flow, Sean's preparing a tool. She has a tool, but it's not too simple, so we don't want to just put it as a download. It'll be discussed on that webinar, but you need to start projecting cash flow. Some of you that have more sophisticated financial systems can do that. Some of you just have to look at how much work is in the pipeline. Do we think we can get paid on it? When will we get paid? And compare that to your basic expenses so that you can keep an eye on that. And if anything changes, your projections change, you may have to trigger your austerity plan a little quicker. And then prioritize billing against trust accounts. A number of you have trust accounts that you can work against. Let's draw down that cash and get that work completed as well. Sean, anything that you want to say here?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, so we think this is very, very important for all of us to be paying attention to right now. So strategy 8. Strategy 8 is marketing and intake. You know, if you've been around us at all, you know that my favorite saying is never, ever, 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 ever stop your marketing. And that goes for now as well. As a matter of fact, we'd argue that you should step up your marketing efforts. Don't reduce spending here if you can help it. Keep focused on your strategic relationships, your strategic referral sources. Stay connected with them any way you can, whether you're using blogs, social media, telephone, in-person get-togethers where you're doing one-on-one things. You're not doing any big seminars or anything like that. But this is not the time to back off of marketing. Those that are anxious and in a reactive mode will back off. That's not your job here. Yours is to stay focused on it. Some of you, things may slow down in the firm. Use that slowdown to overhaul your social media platforms, your digital platform, anything that your website. You want to do that infrastructure work now if things slow down. And you may experiment with some alternative intake methods. Some of you might experiment with remote sign up where you go out to the client and do the sign up. I think most of the personal injury firms are going to have to get very creative here. They're used to doing some of this, but we may have to step that up. You might even experiment with video sign up. And you're going to want to use any vehicle you can and experiment with it. Some might even do drive-in sign up where people drive up through, there might be a tent outside your building and people drive up and they can do a sign up there. So nothing is too crazy right now. Experiment if you have to, but we still want to make that work. And by the way, just to make sure we're going to see a lot more on social media. Make sure you have a policy. We don't want people posting anything about someone in a firm having a cold or making a joke about it or making a joke about the coronavirus. Everything should stay very focused, centered on adding value and support to your clients, referral sources, and your team. So make sure everybody is very clear about that. We don't want any work on that. By the way, again, we're going to do an individual. We're trying to give you 10 things that you can start doing right now. Some of you will be at different levels of each of these, and we're going to give you more detail for those that want it. So next week, we're doing another webinar just around staying focused and how to stay focused and what to do in our marketing. So I'll give you the dates and times at the end of this. Again, just like we said with the talent, there's things to be aware of on the other side of this. A couple of things. There's going to be deferred demand for your services. So new client intake might fall off for most of you in the next couple of months. I suspect it will, but it doesn't mean those issues have gone away. Your clients still have pain. They still have frustration. So there probably is going to be some pent-up demand that when this crisis starts to ease and your clients feel safe and when they're ready, they're going to engage somebody. And if they're in some fashion of already engaging you, that might pop back up. So there's going to be a bump up in your workload as we come out of this. So be prepared for that as well. Strategy 9. This is important. This particular strategy is important to the solos on this call, especially. Sean, do you want to say this?
Yeah. So most of you should have designated an inventory attorney. Most of you, in order to get your liability insurance, had to designate somebody. Whether or not you've really met with that person, discussed what it means to be a backup attorney, we don't know. But in the event that the owner of the firm, perhaps the only attorney in the firm, should he or she fall ill, there needs to be an inventory or a backup attorney that can step in. They can legally access client files, and they have the authorization to determine which clients need immediate attention. So if you are, ill for a while, and no other attorneys in the firm, you need to make these kinds of arrangements as well, just to protect your clients.
Yeah, so this is going to apply mostly to the solos, but we've got to be, so some of these things we're not thinking about, right? And so the final strategy here is, we said that this is a fluid situation. You're going to have to stay informed. You're going to have to share with each other, learn from each other along the way. And so you may already have vehicles to do that. So I'm going to give you a couple of ways to do that and stay informed, at least for the Atticus community, and it's open to anyone as well. Where as our clients give us a client policy or something about insurance issues, like will our insurance cover this or not? And if we have time, we'll address some of that. We're posting those on the Atticus Advantage website, Facebook page, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. So Mike will, and follow up to this, we'll post that, and Mike could even put it in the chat folder if you can, Mike. I don't know if you have the ability to do that, the links for that. Second thing is, we are instituting a coronavirus preparedness hotline. So it's going to run daily at 9 a.m. Eastern time. These are the times and the dial-in number and the access code. So there's going to be an issue that might pop up. Your staffs are going to have questions. You may have some direct issues you want to address right away. So that's Eastern time. Now, if you're on the West Coast, we're making provisions for that as well. Especially if you're in a group coaching program or you have a practice advisor that's working with you, they can address some of those things. but we will have some time slots designated for you so that you can just press a link and you will be able to schedule a call. So if you're on the West Coast, you may have those issues, and we'll get that information to you. But for right now, there's this hotline.
And Mark, may I say a little about the hotline? We'll open up that hotline at 9 o'clock Eastern every morning, and we'll deal with people on a first-come, first-served basis. So, and if nobody comes on the line, we'll shut it down at about 9:15. So we've done this in the past. This can work really well. Just remember, if you want your question to be handled, get on that line early, because we will be prioritizing according to who shows up the soonest.
So that's all live. And anytime we do a webinar like this, it's recorded so that you can have it and you can share with anyone you need. So we know that each of your practice areas have specific things that impact them that is unique to your practice area. So, for example, if you're a personal injury attorney, we suspect that you will have issues similar to after 9/11 when the insurance companies are trying to hold on to cash. And so what are they going to do? They are going to stall, push out settlements. They're going to fight a little harder. They probably send things to trial a little bit more often. So we've got to prepare for that, talk about it. There's specific issues around family law, personal injury litigation, estate planning, and elder law. Now, we have other practice areas, but these are some of the broad ones, and as they come up, we'll schedule new ones. These are the dates. Mike, I'm not sure how we'll get that information. I'm sure we'll send an email with these basic pieces of information. If you're in one of our programs, you've probably already received this. So again, very specific to your practice area and dealing with those issues. The other thing is that we're doing some issue-specific webinars. So just understanding, some of you haven't really dealt with optimizing and working in the virtual environment, how to deal with technology. So this Thursday, March 19th at 11 a.m., there'll be a webinar. That'll be hosted by Victor Medina, and that will be recorded. So that's live Thursday. You'll be able to ask your questions. Protecting your marketing pipeline and preparing for the deferred demand. We'll be around all of the marketing issues that we can stay focused on. That'll be March 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And then preserving cash flow in an economic slowdown. That'll be March 26th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So you can block out that time. Just if those are critical or important to you, they'll be recorded. You can ask your resource advisor for access to them or for the downloads after we do them. So those are, and there'll probably be more scheduled. These are just some things we know are more urgent and important to you. So Mike, I'd like to do two things. I'd like to open it up to questions, and people can either raise their hands or put it into chat. And I'd also like to check if Cheryl or Carlos, and you know who you are, Cheryl or Carlos, if you're here, raise your hand so Mike can know it. And also Ethan Gross, if you're here, you can raise your hand as well, and Mike can know that, and we can talk. So Mike, we'll open it up to you to moderate for any questions.
Okay, great. First, I'm going to call on Sasha. Sasha, I'm going to unmute you now, and you can ask your question aloud. Can you speak up for us?
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey there. How are you? Okay. Well, I am calling from the Boston Burbs. My assistant, who is fairly new and still on probationary status, has to take public transit here, which our public transit already is cut back to a Saturday-only schedule, and who knows, it could cut out altogether. Since she's probationary, she doesn't have any sick leave or vacation time accrued, and I don't know if I'm going to have enough work for her to do at home, given that so much of what is needed in our firm right now really has to be done on site with paper management. So I am not really clear what I can't. whether I should plan on furloughing her, even if she is probationary, or giving her some sort of reduced salary if we do end up in lockdown, or what. I want to be fair is what it boils down to, but at the same time, I don't want to spend money that I don't necessarily have.
Sean, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So if you furlough her, that indicates a desire for her to come back to work for sure. You're almost guaranteeing she'll have a job in the future. Can you make that promise?
Right. Not 100%. I mean, so far she's improved and there's promise. Her 90-day is up mid-May. So, the jury, there's a lot I like, there's a lot of rough edges, so the jury's still a little out here.
Yeah. Well, furloughing her really does guarantee her a future position. Okay. So if you're not sure, you might go for the layoff option. She can collect unemployment, and then you can ask her to check back in with you, every month or so. Okay. If you really valued her and you said, oh my God, she's fantastic, and it took me a long time to find her, and I've invested a lot of training in her, then I would say maybe figure out a way to furlough or put on a reduced salary. Okay. But I'm not hearing that level of enthusiasm.
I'm just uncertain. Obviously, I've never been in this position. Who has? So I'm just trying to work things out in my mind. I mean, in the meantime, if she is going to work from home, also I have to invest in a secure laptop, but I've already reached out to my tech guy about that. So there's that added cost as well that I have to contemplate.
So, Doctor, for me, it's two things. One is I'm going to look at cash flow, the reality of my cash flow. Yeah. And depending on, as Sean said, whether we think even if we furloughed her and she came back at the end, should be still picking up on her sort of 90-day perspective and what she's going to make it. Right. But I'm looking at cash flow first to make the decision, and then I'm going to be very straight with her that we're going to have to move in this direction. I'm going to have to either furlough or lay you off, and it probably will happen the next 2 weeks. So it gives her time to apply, find out what she's due, if there's any government support for this right now.
Right. Okay. All right. So still some food for thought.
What is your gut saying you're going to do?
I mean, there's a lot of she actually has some capabilities right now and some things that need to happen. Particularly, she's tech savvy, and she would be a good person to have her work on sort of researching website development, that kind of thing, in putting together information, because we do need to overhaul our website anyway. So there are particular projects I could give her that may not be direct, client-oriented work, but certainly might still be very useful, but maybe not enough, though, to keep her going on a full-time basis.
So I could lay her off, I could furlough her, and I could even give her projects that are like contract to her while she's out as another possibility. Right. So after hearing this and knowing all the facts, what do you think the course is you need to take? Or do you still need time to think about it?
I still need time to think about it. I mean, part of it is I got to go back and take a hard look at her caseload, see what, there are a number of things we've talked about with having her work on anyway. So if she does have a laptop, I could certainly put her to work on more marketing-oriented tasks, cleaning up mailing lists, that kind of thing. Whether there's 40 hours a week of that, I have no idea, but it'd be better than nothing.
Okay, good. All right, Sasha, thank you.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Mike?
Okay, yes, we have several other questions typed in. One says that that they have enjoyed the webinar so far. In terms of communicating with clients, say by email, I've probably gotten 50 of those emails from different companies over the past week. I think there is a lot of fatigue because of those emails. Is it better to communicate now and get lost in the shuffle, or wait a week? That comes from Curtis.
Okay, Sean, I'll give my perspective on this. Personally,
Okay.
I wouldn't wait. Where you might be getting overload, your clients may not, and some of your referral sources. Your referral sources maybe, but your clients are probably not. I think we want to demonstrate that we are on top of this, even if it's a short message and saying, here are the 3 things we're going to be doing for you right now that'll provide value. I think it's still valuable to communicate with people, let them know you're on top of it. Do you agree with that, Sean?
I do. I think that's a good way to go. I think in many of the matters you're dealing with clients, they're very important to those clients. So I would reach out and communicate sooner rather than later.
And Kurt responds, great, he agrees with what you're saying, and referrals on clients now, referral sources later. Okay, so we have had a number of people asking this question, if they can get a copy of the slides, if this presentation is being recorded. It is being recorded, and we will be sending out a link so that you can watch it again yourself or share it with others. We will also send you a copy of the slides as well as the handouts as well. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. Our next question, or is actually, this is just a statement from Lizzie. She says, our firm did a drive-up sign-up yesterday and it worked out great. So that's a good idea.
Great.
The next question is, should we adjust our client matrix in response to a fall of client intake? And that comes from Fritz.
So first off, Mike, I just want to let everyone know that Sean and I will stay on the call after the 1 o'clock, after the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock Eastern time finish. We'll stay on the call to answer additional questions. And Mike, if at some point after we answer this question, I'd love to hear Lizzie talk about the remote sign up she did, or this drive up sign up. I'd love to hear about that and see what happened and what they did. So could you say the question again, Mike? Are we talking about reducing
the? Should we adjust our client matrix in response to the fall of client intake?
Sean, I'll give my take on that. I would say my basic instinct is no. The demand isn't there. The demand isn't there. And if we go too low, we're just going to be picking up a lot of stuff that might, usually if we go lower on our client intake matrix, our scorecard for taking clients in the door, for those of you that aren't familiar, we usually get a lot of C&D business that's not going to pay, it's going to have a lot of problems. It'll just tie you up a little bit more than you want to be tied up. Sean?
I would agree. Maybe you have more B clients, maybe you let a few more C clients in the door, but we know that a lot of C&D clients can be problematic, and they will add a lot of stress to you, to your staff. You'll end up doing work you're not getting paid for. We don't want you to lower your standards too low because of that. I think it would be a mistake.
Mike, is that helpful?
Yes. Our next question is, will you be discussing hourly employees and reducing their hours? We have gone remote and only want to pay for the hours that staff are actually working. What about salaried employees?
Sean, I'm going to pass that one to you.
I believe that with salaried employees, you can have a little more flexibility. I think they have to maintain standard work business hours, so that if you need to reach out to them, they need to be available during the time period that you would normally be available. If you're going to hit what we would call the second level of austerity, you might look for some across the board pay cuts. You might see partners taking less of a draw. You might see that kind of thing happening. At the third level, you may see partners not taking salaries at all. In fact, you might see partners having to kick in and loan the firm money. And we certainly want you to avoid that at all counts. So you might meet with your team, See, not knowing what your salaried employees are doing exactly, it's hard for me to say without more information. But you could, put them on 75% salary, switch them over to a project base. A lot of different ways you can handle that depending on the roles that they play.
So the only thing else I would say, Sean, is some of you are going to struggle with this remote things because you can't see people. Our experience is when people go remote, they work 10 times harder from home than they do in the office. They start working after 6 more than they would. I know that you're not necessarily trying to encourage that, but people go through phases, and we're going to probably talk about this at the 11 o'clock webinar on Thursday with Victor, but people go through phases that they might originally struggle and even it might look like goofing off at first, but people find a rhythm and they become far more productive at home because there's less distractions even for them, many of them. So you're going to have trust issues around this, whether they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. I would say lean into the trust here. Most people are working harder, more focused, and longer from home than they are in the office.
I would say have productivity goals for them, figure out, what metrics can you apply to what their particular job description is supposed to be delivering. Are they revenue generators? Not sure who these people are, but if they're revenue generators, you can track their productivity by, measuring their revenues on an ongoing basis. And even virtually putting in a structure of accountability for everyone so that you've got your salaried people, with regular meetings with the owners and shareholders, whatever your particular arrangement is, definitely make sure that don't turn people loose to work at home. A lot of firms are instituting a morning meeting every morning. People come on the call, they report what they're doing, they say what they're up to, they say what their challenges are, they get the day's agenda, they move on. So, this is the time for leadership to inject a sense of purpose, a sense of structure, a structure of accountability, to really make sure the team is headed in the right direction. You need to help them by putting in these sorts of accountability measures.
Yeah, again, I put up those times for the webinars and the technology and optimizing the virtual environment. Going along with that. And as you're doing things and finding things that work, post them on Facebook, give them to us to post for others to see as well. So Mike, are there other questions we can address?
Oh yes, we have several questions typed in. And just on what you just said, if anybody does have something that they'd like us to share with other law firms as an example, you can send it to grow@atticusadvantage.com. And again, that's grow@atticusadvantage.com. So one is a compliment here. We attended 2 weeks of daily webinars from a variety of sources. This was the only one that helped with nuts and bolts. Thank you. That comes from Thomas Tona. Thank you, Thomas. We also have another one. Carl Dore is also complimenting this. Out of all the time I've been involved with the Atticus family, I've never been more impressed with the focus on what you do for us and how you handle these items. So thank you. I have a next question from John, and John says, how much of a credit line do you suggest drawing down?
Depends on the size firm, as much as you can get. So if you're saying of the credit line I got how much, I will tell you in our instance, we've already drawn 100% of it, and we moved it into now I will say that Atticus is in a very cash flow strong position. We're not immediately concerned. But we just don't know what's going to happen. So we drew the whole thing and we put in a separate bank. And so I would take as much as I could get. The worst case scenario is I've paid a little extra interest, and then I'm going to move it back into the credit line after I feel comfortable.
Great. Thank you, Mark. The next one is, thank you for this webinar. Will the upcoming webinars also be available to people who are not members yet, in parentheses, of the Atticus community? It comes from Deborah.
The answer is yes. We're not going to separate these to just Atticus clients. These are for all, a lot of the Atticus community have colleagues that they respect and like, and that they might even be a referral source that they want to make sure is getting on top of this stuff. So they're very welcome to invite them to these and to share them if they like. Mike, just checking on something. Did Carlos, they may not be on this one yet, but Carlos and Cheryl, did either of them raise their hand, or did
Cheryl
Ethan?
Herndon did, and Carlos is not.
Well, let's go with Cheryl. Is Cheryl available? Can you unmute her?
Yes, I can. Let me get her on my attendee list. We've got several hundred people on here today. 1 second.
So Cheryl, while he's unmuting you, I know that, so Cheryl's in a firm in Pennsylvania, and they've got a pretty good sized firm. But Cheryl is been in charge of making sure that her and Carlos have been making sure that the firm can work remotely and how they do it. And they took, I'm going to guess, close to 200 people, and as of yesterday went totally remote. And I'm just kind of curious how that worked out.
This is actually, she says she's the wrong Cheryl. This is Cheryl Herndon, a new member.
Oh, I know Cheryl.
Sorry.
I was looking, okay.
Yeah, you didn't give me
Cheryl.
your last name, Mark. Sorry about that. I can tell you also, you asked me earlier if Ethan was going to be online, and Ethan is. So let me unmute Ethan here in just a moment.
Okay, so Ethan emailed me earlier, and so I'll wait for Ethan to get
Actually,
unmuted.
I can't unmute him. There is no phone symbol or microphone symbol. So Ethan, if you can type in your question, I'll read it aloud for you.
So Ethan doesn't have a question, but Ethan has some guidelines for dealing with your insurance carriers.
Okay.
And Mike, I'll have Ethan get that over to you, and we'll post that on the Facebook and LinkedIn. And mostly, it's unlikely for most of your firms that your insurance coverage, your I'm sorry, I'm going blank on the type of coverage, Sean, but
business interruption insurance.
Business interruption it's unlikely that it's going to cover this, but it's always valuable to check with your insurance carrier. And Ethan had some pretty good perspectives on that. I was just going to ask.
Now, Mark, I do want to say, and of course, the government is, making plans even as we speak that are not finalized. But the Small Business Administration is making moves to get infusions of cash that they can lend to small businesses. They have two different types of small business loans, and one is the disaster relief loan, which also covers, in addition to physical disasters, it covers economic disasters as well. And I think we can all agree we're headed towards one of those. So some of you may want to keep an eye on Small Business Association or administration websites to see what's happening there, because they will be on if they can scale up, they're going to be on the front lines of making loans to small businesses that are really impacted financially. So keep your eye on, there's a Small Business Express website, there's a government-related one. Keep an eye on all of that. You may have to fill out a survey. Right now, the government is looking to see what the need is in each area, and depending on what your need is, you fill out a survey, you submit it. This lets the government know how big the need is in your area and makes it more likely that your area will get an infusion of cash. We shall see how this plays out, but that's one place to keep an eye out.
Thanks, Sean. And Mike, if there are other questions, and I know that we talked about, I think it was Lizzie that did the drive-up sign-ups, the drive-through sign-ups. If she unmuted, I'd love to hear that. But any other questions as well?
We have actually several more questions, but you let me know when you want to call time. Our next question is, if all documents are cloud-based, does using personal laptops present a problem with liability insurance? This comes from Katie.
Katie, I don't know for that. I don't know about that personally. Sean might. I don't know about that for sure. I know that Victor will probably address that on the Thursday, March 19th call, 11 o'clock. He may have a better sense of that, and you might even just check with your liability insurer to check on that. But I don't know personally.
Okay. And Ethan is now, I'm going to unmute him so he can speak to the information you mentioned earlier, Mark. Ethan,
Ethan, are you
you're
there?
now unmuted.
And you may not be unmuted. You might be unmuted on the system, but not in your personal telephone,
Yeah.
Ethan. Okay. While Ethan's working on that, Mike, let's go to another question.
Sure. Our next question is, my office is working remotely. At what point in time should we consider forwarding U.S. mail to someone's home, if that is even possible and or a good idea?
Oh, so great. I'm glad you mentioned that, and I apologize. We should have put that on one of the things to think about as you go remotely, but that's really an important one. Let's say your building gets closed down and you have to forward the telephone line someplace. What do you do with the mail? So definitely you can go to the post office and you can change it to a post office box, have someone designated to go through that, your office manager, depending on your size firm, your bookkeeper, but someone go to the post office and get it, or have it forwarded to some sort of either your house or something that you might be dealing with it in sort of a controlled fashion. So it can either be picked up at the post office, which is probably the best solution because different people might go by and pick it up. That was such a great point. I apologize we didn't say something about that earlier.
Great.
Also, Mark, if you set up a remote receptionist and that part of that person's job is to scan documents and distribute them, if they have a scanner in their home-based office, they can perform a lot of that same function. Get the mail, scan the mail, distribute the documents.
So they could pick it up from the post office, or it could be forwarded to their house and they could scan it and distribute it inside your system. On the receptionist, I will say that some of you'll have different systems for forwarding that, and that, again, Victor, I'm putting a lot on him, may address that in the technology call, but a great number of our clients at the smaller level, and this will have to be used at larger levels perhaps now, is using Ruby Receptionist, and they rave about them. So they get rave reviews, and they'll probably become very popular during this time. Ruby Receptionist. Mike,
Mark,
another question?
Yeah, the next question actually, someone is looking for a referral for a website or a program to use for video conferencing with clients. This comes from Isabella. And if I could add something here, a lot of the video conferencing providers have free accounts like Zoom does and joinme.com does as well. One of the things that I have noticed, because I follow those accounts online, is that they're experiencing quite a bit of a uptick on usage. So if you do sign up for a free account with Zoom or JoinMe or another platform, keep in mind that the experience when you come on might be a little glitchy because they are having massive numbers of people signing up for these accounts. Mark, do you have any other recommendations, or Sean?
So I'll say the ones we use more frequently. So Atticus has been a virtual company for quite a while. We do virtual work with a lot of our clients. Our team, most of our team is a virtual team, and we use these quite a bit. And we tend to go between 3 different ones. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but one is GoToWebinar,
Yes.
which we're on right now.
It also has
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Mike.
It also has GoToMeeting, which is the lower level, which you can use with clients more easily.
Right. And by the way, don't get the free ones on this. I think Mike would probably agree with this. Whatever one is, buy at least their lowest level version, because you want as much control as you can get on them.
Yeah.
And they're not very expensive. The other one that we use is called JoinMe, and it's very easy to set up. We don't use it for a lot of video conferencing. When we are going to do more video conferencing, see each other like you might see me here, which tends to work out well. A lot of people don't like this, especially from the home environment, but you get to interact with people a little bit more clearly, and you can see when people are talking. It's less talking over each other. We use a product called Zoom, Z-O-O-M, quite a bit. So Zoom, GoToWebinar, or Join Me are very good ones that we've used. And I'm guessing the market's going to be flooded with them pretty soon, but those
Yeah.
are the basic ones.
A similar comment came in on recommendations for team communications for folks who are working remotely, using tools such as Teams from Office 365, Slack, Flock. We also, in Atticus, we use a project management team software called Rike. So do you have any other recommendations for team communications and collaboration?
I don't. Again, I have to apologize for putting so much off to Victor on the March 19th call, which will be recorded. Okay. Mike, I'd love to capture some of these and send them to Victor in ahead so he can be prepared for them.
Yes.
But
I'm pretty sure Victor uses Slack with his team. Yeah. I believe that's how they communicate. So he'd probably like that recommendation.
Yeah, and I think I would ask him, though, because there's probably a couple. I don't use enough of them to make a good recommendation. So I would save that for Victor. And we might even, I don't know if there's another way to assess these questions, Mike, but I love these technology questions.
Here's a couple of related questions. Should we ask non-timekeeping employees to keep track of their tasks, or rather account of their time? And does Atticus have any forms that will help with remote supervision?
We do not actually have forms that are designated for this exact purpose, but if you're a client and you have the question batching form, that's the form in which staff members, team members, who have questions for the attorney and are trying to not just burst through the door in an office environment and ask the attorney a question disturbing their production time. They just group all of their questions in one place. And when they have a designated meeting with the attorney, they bring all those questions, ask all those questions at one time of the attorney. We do a lot with our clients on interruption management, and I think the same applies when you have people working virtually, right? We want to respect their time. We don't want to be bombarding them with a ton of messages if they can be held. If, batching meetings and delegation meetings and case status meetings are still being held, I think it's a familiar structure for many of you. I think it'll help you be able to delegate and answer questions most efficiently with the minimum of interruption. And case status meetings, you can do them virtually. You can have a roundtable discussion. You can get on Join Me or Zoom or just a big free conference line and do a roundtable on your cases to keep them moving. Try to kind of lift as many of your normal meeting structures from your office environment and put them onto the virtual environment. This lends structure and this sense of things being ongoing and scheduled has a calming effect on most team members. It's, it reassures them that things are going on in a structured way. In other words, we don't want chaos. We want you all to, take as much control as you can, be as proactive as you can instead of being reactive.
And for those of you that are working with a practice advisor or in the practice growth program, the Dominate Your Market program, you can either ask your practice advisor directly for that form and suggestions, or you could ask your resource advisor for that form and suggestions, and they'll send it right out to you. And you could also, Mike, if I'm not wrong, Sean could probably, or one of the resource advisors, get it to you. And if you emailed grow@atticusadvantage.com, Mike could probably send that out to you. Is that right,
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like some more questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to stay and answer as many questions as we can, Mike.
Great. Here's one from Robin. In our case, productivity will likely go down working at home because many of our staff have children at home due to school closures. So there will be an abundance of interruptions. Do you have any suggestions to help manage this and keep everyone productive yet meet their family needs?
Sean may, but I will tell you that I find that working parents, especially working moms. Most of our resource advisors are virtual and they have children. They find a way to manage that very well. I think they will take blocks of time and do that, and they'll cut off from the office for a few minutes and work with the child or take some break with the kids. But they come back and then they work in the evenings when they have some more time. So again, I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised out of this, the response that we have to deal with and work more virtual. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at how well people do and how well they manage their families and their teams at home. Some of them will have a lot of chaos. I personally don't have children. I don't have good suggestions, but I would ask most working moms or that already do virtually work from home, how they deal with it when the kids are on spring break and those sort of things.
Let me throw in a few ideas. So if there's an older child who can supervise the other kids, it would be nice if the working parent had a spot, whether it's their bedroom, their dining room, wherever it is, where they can close the door. I know that's not always possible, but try to make the room as quiet as possible. Make a deal with the kids that they are going for the next hour, hour and a half. They're going to watch a movie or whatever they might be doing, playing games. And then, the working parents can have hour and a half of production time. This is especially effective if you have older relatives or older kids who can kind of supervise any of the younger kids and keep them away from the office. That would be probably, and keep them occupied. That would be my best recommendation. Also, if there's pets in the house and people are working from home and dogs are barking when the Amazon delivers something or whatever, try to keep the pets as quiet as possible, while all that's going on. But I think in the next month or two, people will be very understanding of background noises because pretty much America is going virtual at this point, and almost everybody that can go virtual will go virtual. So I think there will be a lot of empathy for those situations.
We did just have someone type in response to this question. There are many online resources currently helping parents who are working from home, scholastic readers, science, online lessons, etc. So if you need to keep the kids busy, there are some resources out there to help them stay busy, since many of them are out of school. A couple of other suggestions, and then I'll read another question. Monday.com is another great project management tool that comes from Nora Bergman, one of our practice advisors. And Smith.ai is a great virtual reception service as well that comes from Mike, not me, but a different Mike out there. So thank you, Mike, and thank you, Nora. Our next question is, what can a lawyer do if their practice is solely based on court appearances with the courthouses being shut down for 15 to 30 days? Criminal defense, what can I do? That comes from Athena.
Market. That would be, John, my thing would be market. I can't do anything. I can keep the clients. I can make sure I'm taking care of the clients, let them understand what's happening with the courts, that you've got it under control, and that as soon as the courts get open, you're first in line. You'll do whatever you can to get them handled. But they're at pause right now, and there may be some, especially for criminal law practice, there may be some circumstances where your client still might be in detention and you have to pay a little bit more attention, but those are things you may have to do. And if I'm not doing that, I'm using the time to connect to my referral sources and make sure I'm supporting them, trying to find value for them and letting them know what you're doing during this time to take care of clients. Sean, that would be me. What you're thinking?
No, I agree.
Your instinct is not going to want to market for most of you during some of this slow time, but this is the time to pull that focus up, pull that that marketing role that we know is such an important part of your practice up to the surface, and put some accountability. Make sure you've got somebody holding you accountable to doing things to keep the marketing moving.
And Mark, if I could put a different spin on the word marketing here. So we preach building know, like, and trust with clients and referral sources. And I would say this is the time to do that. Your best marketing is to emphasize the relationship, see how you can be a resource for them, things we talked about earlier. But you don't have to be out there beating the drum saying, come use me in my law firm, I am the greatest thing ever. That's not the direction. That's not the tone. The tone would be, I'm out here, however I can help you. I will try to keep you informed of what's going on, when the courts are reopening, when hearings are scheduled. You know, be a resource, be informative, be caring and in touch with clients' needs and that of referral sources. So it is marketing, but it's rapport building. That's the kind of marketing you want to engage in right now.
Thanks, Sean. Great point.
Sure.
Okay.
Mike, another question?
Yeah, well, one bit of information comes from David. David says Florida has started the small business bridge loan of $50,000, $100,000 with exceptions. Starting today, applications are being accepted. So if you're in Florida, that may be something to look at. Next question is on the upcoming webinars. People are asking because they don't currently see them on our website. We are currently building those as we speak, and we will be sending out invitations to those via email. We will be posting links to register on our social media pages as well, and we'll get them up on our website as soon as possible. So again, they are open to the public. Next question is, do you have any more good ideas for call masking or call spoofing so that folks won't get all attorneys' personal phone numbers?
Say more about that, Mike. If you
I think what they're
understand
asking is they don't want to have the attorney's personal phone numbers show up on someone's caller ID. Is there anything we can recommend technology-wise? That might be something we want to have Victor answer on his.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Suggested that Ruby, Call Ruby offers call masking for calls and texts.
Yeah, I think there's so many questions also on the technology and working from home side. We may have to set up some sort of something on the Facebook site, Mike, that's just working on this. So we'll have to talk about.
Yeah, I'm getting some suggestions typed in as well. So
okay,
I'll keep track of those and add those to our Facebook and LinkedIn pages as suggestions. So if you're following us, I did put the links in the chat box to all of our social media profiles. And I'm having people, they're currently sending me some of their letters and best practices that we'll be sharing additional ones.
Oh, thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that, because that makes such a difference to everyone else. I know we have Atticus team members that are in they're sort of a sub-community in a particular program, like a Dominate Your Market, and they share things with each other, which is brilliant. But it makes such a difference for everyone else in those groups. And so if we put that publicly for everyone else, some of that would make a difference for somebody that's just struggling to figure out a way to do something. So thank you for doing that.
Yes. Okay. Let's see here. We are all digital, and this has been a good push for us to do remote work. However, I have no experience in managing offsite workers. What period of check-in calls, remote team meetings do you recommend on a weekly basis? This comes from Fritz again.
I would recommend a slightly more heightened version of what they're doing in the office, right? So perhaps there's a Monday morning meeting where Fritz, if he's the owner, establishes, what everybody should be doing that week. Then perhaps that's followed by individual batched kind of meetings that happen with team members to check in on what they're doing. Perhaps if there's a normal schedule, say every Thursday at lunch, of doing case status meetings where you go through your inventory of open cases and matters, you can still do that. I would do just a little bit more than what you normally do. If you normally have a good cadence of accountability around who does what and when you check in on it, I would pump that up a little bit more in a virtual environment, just to give people additional structure and a feeling like somebody is watching, and we're all in this together, and we're really focusing on the work and helping the clients get what they need.
That's very great, Sean. And some firms, you know, normally inside the office would do what they call a stand-up every morning. Everybody would, the teams would get together and they would talk about, okay, this is what we're going to do today. This is what I'm focused on. This is what I'm focused on. And it'd be a very short meeting. So depending on your teams, you probably would have a daily morning call. You may have an afternoon check-in and an even check-in. So what are we going to do today? Where are we at midday? And what are we going to do at the end? What did we accomplish today? So those don't have to be very long. They can be 15 minutes. And then you may have around your, for example, your finance team, your marketing team. You might have a designate or production teams. You may have a call set every day or twice a week or 3 times a week to deal with certain issues. I definitely want a regular meeting with my financial person, my bookkeeper, making sure we're staying in touch with, excuse me, any financial forecasting. Mike, do we have another question?
A couple more. One wants to know if we can get draft notifications that others are using for, if we have draft notifications to our clients and stakeholders. We have posted a couple examples from some of our clients already on our social media profiles, and we'll continue to do so. Sean, do you know if we have any other draft notifications for clients and stakeholders that would be useful?
I think Christina has posted everything that has come from people in programs as well as Stephanie. I think that pretty much what we have is out there now.
Okay. All right. And then here's an idea that comes in from Claudia. On Monday, I went to the local Chamber of Commerce and volunteered to provide 5 Q&A answers on various subject areas. So, for example, 5 Q&As for employee management. And the chamber was delighted where they are so focused on small business. So it's just an FYI, and she kept it oriented to very basic practical questions.
That's excellent.
Now that's a perfect example of how to market by being of service to people. She knew they had questions. She knows they have concerns. She offered her services. That's a really great way to promote yourself without promoting yourself, if you know what I mean. She gave herself a little platform to demonstrate her expertise. I think that's a great example. Good job.
Okay. And next one, another suggestion from Nora that brings up Nora Bergman, one of our practice advisors. We do have a mental health and resources handout available as well. And if that's something that you're interested in, you can email us at grow@atticusadvantage.com. Sean, do you have any other recommendations from our resources on mental health and resources handouts?
You know, Nora's on the Mental Health and Wellness Committee of the Florida Bar. She sent me a whole list of resources. These are articles, websites, all kinds of great stuff. It's a wonderful compilation of different articles. I would recommend everyone get a look at these articles. They can be distributed among your clients, posted on your Facebook page. They can be used with team members. There's articles in there dealing with, you know, how to control your anxiety, what to do if you're stressed, a little bit on mindfulness, all kinds of great resources, all the way up to addiction hotlines and suicide hotlines that are available for attorneys who get seriously depressed and stressed. So this document has a great range of options on it, and I would recommend all of you write to Mike and get this. It's fantastic.
All right. There are no more typed in questions. We do have one hand raised, and let me find that person here. Lizzie has her hand up. Lizzie, I'm going to unmute you.
Lizzie, I'd love to hear your drive-in sign up, how that worked.
Lizzie, it says you're self-muted right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So we can
Go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much. This has been a really great webinar, and I've learned a lot. Yes, so we did do a drive-up sign-up, as we're now going to call it, I guess. I work for the Michigan Law Center under Michelle Fuller, and we had a client who's very elderly. She's got cancer, not feeling well, didn't want to come to the office, was very worried about exposing herself. So we offered, we'll come out to your car. Like, that's absolutely no problem there. And it worked out really well. We were able to get her book together quickly and make sure that she felt secure and heard, and we answered all her questions. So it was luckily it was a nice day out yesterday, so it worked out very well. But it was a good experience. I think that that's something that we would want to offer going forward as well.
I love that, Lizzie, and I think, I don't know if you guys are going in that direction, but it would be an interesting service to experiment with you, because you know you have a at-risk population, and
Absolutely.
some of them, people are really very nervous right now. I mean, even very healthy people are really, even though there's guidelines on getting out and doing things and staying in the community, being responsible, some people are very nervous and not coming out of their house. And I think the more at risk are even more concerned. So anything you offer like that, I think it'd be a great experiment to continue to see if we can put that out there as an offering. I'm so glad you guys did that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Lizzie.
And Michelle's a leader out there anyway, so we know that you guys were going to do something innovative.
Oh, absolutely.
Great. Mike, it sounds like we're there now. If there's no other hands up, no other questions, Mike, what we'll do, this is recorded. I don't know if we can send the whole thing. We can make it available. It's probably a pretty big webinar at this point. And we will have, hopefully by the end of the day, we'll have an email out to you all with the other 3 or 5 webinars that are more specific. These were as, do this, the 10 things you could do right now, but as you can see, we can dive into technology or marketing or cash flow far more deeply than we have on this call.
Yeah, we do have about 160 people still hanging out with us right now, and we topped out at about 308, I think. So thank you all for dedicating this time to helping your clients by learning how to serve them through this time. Any of the webinars that you see on the screen there, any of the other information, we'll be posting it as soon as we possibly can. We will be sending out an email to all the registrants of this webinar by tomorrow with a copy of the slideshow, copies of the handouts, and a link to rewatch the recording that you can also share with others. So if you have any questions, you can email us at grow@atticusadvantage.com. I also posted my own email address in the chat box too. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark and Sean.
Thanks,
we
Mike.
really appreciate
Great job.
it. All right, everybody have a great day.
Bye,
Thank you, everyone. Good luck.